Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is a video series 2, part 9. In part 4 of video series 1, I have shared with you some highlight on what does the new series mean for biology. In this part, I would like to share with you more details. These slides summarize the basics of biology in the new philosophy series. First of all, biology is driven by the will of individual efficiency. Biology is the only scientific law that is driven by the will of individual efficiency. This makes biology very unique. A biological process can only take place when the will of individual efficiency of our existence is strong enough. High individualism is responsible for the origin of life, the creation of new living species, creation of the mankind, and the early evolution of the mankind. On the other side, high group interaction is responsible for disappearance of living species and some mankind groups in the early time. DNA is the main carrier of the four wills of living beings and the four original wills of the mankind. As a comparison, the carry of the four wills of mineral materials is the material itself. This difference explains many differences in properties between living beings and mineral materials. In the new philosophy series, the origin of the life is simple to explain. First, staff should have a combination of a strong will of individual happiness and a weak will of group efficiency. Second, the staffs are exposed to an environment that has a strong will of group disaster. When a strong will of group disaster of the environment is released, the will of group disaster of the staff is magnified substantially. The will of individual efficiency of the staff is enhanced substantially. The staff with a strong will of individual efficiency starts a big evolution that leads to the start of a biological process. In short, the origin of life is a result of big evolution of light materials in proper natural disasters. What I described here is a general process for the origin of life. It is not necessarily limited to the Earth. Life could be created anywhere in the universe if the will condition for starting a biological process could be met. The first step of origin of life is the conversion from simple inorganic materials into complex organic materials. Experiments of Miller in 1952 provides some evidence to support the new theory. In these experiments, water vapors and a gas mixture of water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen were used. These materials have a combination of strong will of individual happiness and a weak will of group efficiency. Miller used a continuous electric spark to simulate lightning. Lightning is a result of the release of strong will of group disaster. Then the strong evolution took place. The light inorganic materials became complex organic component amino acid. This experiment is a supporting evidence of the new explanation on the origin of life in the previous slides. The Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. The Earth was very unlucky since its formation. It was invaded frequently by asteroids. The temperature of the Earth was very high. Even today, a lot of energy from that time is trapped in the Earth. We see earthquakes and volcano disruptions. The adverse environment in the early days of Earth created the conditions for the origin of life on the Earth. The oceans were formed about 4.4 billion years ago. The earliest microorganisms were found 4.3 billion years ago. In the new philosophy series, the will of individual efficiency in general drives three themes. First, self-learning, and then self-development and resource efficiency. The implication of the strong will of individual efficiency in an evolution process should be, first, a quick evolution. Second, own initiative. Then self-development and the capability of self-repairing, and the diversity in the evolution process and diversity in the evolution result in the end. Let me have a look at what happened in the evolution of living beings on the Earth. Quick evolution. Single-cell bacteria evolved into human beings in 4.2 billion years. As a comparison, the evolution of a star takes more than 10 billion years. I should mention that the short lifetime of the human being and the life of the living being is a part of the quick evolution process of the living beings. Own initiative. Living beings can adapt themselves to changing environment. The adaptation is not only passive but also proactive. You see many initiatives from living beings. Self-development. The growth of a living being is under control of its own DNA. The DNA is in continuous evolution. Capability of self-repair, self-replication, self-assembly, and auto-catalyst are typical phenomena in the biological world. A biological cell can get rid of trash and harmful materials and does self-repairing. Diversity in evolution process and evolution result. In the world of living beings, each species follows its own optimization and evolution route. Some people wondered why not all animals, especially those animals with high intelligence, have evolved into human beings. This is the answer. Each species follows its own optimization and evolution route. The diversity of evolution of living beings on the Earth is clearly demonstrated. There have been about 2 million of registered living species. The actual number is estimated to be about 14 million. The human DNA has 5 billion of variations. In part 4 of video series 1, I have shared with you the explanation on the Darwin's evolution theory and a simple model for the reproduction of living species. For the completeness, I repeat 3 slides here. The first slide is on the natural selection law of Darwin. The definition of Darwin is that the differential survival and the reproduction of individuals due to difference in phenotype. The new theoretical explanations are: first, the phenotype of an animal is the observation of the symmetries on the body of the animal. Second, symmetries on the animal body are a reflection of the degrees of the will of individual efficiency and the will of group efficiency of the animal. The natural selection law is therefore governed by the will of individual efficiency and the will of group efficiency of the animals. These 2 wills are crucial for the survival and reproduction of the animals. The second slide is on the adaptation of living beings to changing environment. The new theoretical explanation is as the following. The female, if any, senses the needed adaptation by using her high comprehending capability and translates the information to chemicals in her eggs. Chemicals are responsible in the reproduction process of the human being to recombine the DNA from the eggs and sperm for their next generation. The high comprehending capability of a female is therefore essential for the adaptation of living beings to changing environment. The relatively high comprehending capability of a female explains also the difference between female and male in their behaviors. For the human being in general, the comprehending capability of a person is driven by the original wills of individual happiness and individual efficiency of the person. As I said before, the social wills of the human society can suppress the original wills of the mankind. This means that the human society can influence negatively the reproduction process of the human being and the evolution of the mankind. The third slide is on a new model in the philosophy theory for the reproduction of living species. I list 4 typical results from the reproduction process of a living species here. First, balanced four-wheels leads to balanced reproduction. See the drawing on top left. Second, strong will of individual efficiency leads to strong evolution and creation of new species. See the drawing on top right. Third, strong will of group efficiency leads to quantitative expansion of the species. See the drawing in the bottom left. Last, strong will of group disaster leads to extinction of the species. See the drawing in bottom right. A strong will of group efficiency would build automatically a strong will of group disaster. It means that strong will of group efficiency leads to the extinction of the species in the end. The new model explains the creation, survival, extinction of living species in a history. In my book, I looked at the history of living species on the Earth. The picture shows the extinction rate of living species in the last 550 million years. The fate of living species can be explained by their wills. I list 4 scenarios here. For survival of a living species, the 4 wills of a living species are reasonably balanced. The release of the will of a group disaster should not be dramatic. For creation or faster evolution of a living species, the existing living species has a strong will of individual happiness and a weak will of group efficiency. For slowdown of the evolution of a living species, the living species has a weak will of individual happiness and a strong will of group efficiency. These scenarios solved some mysteries in the history of living species on Earth. Some of the high extinction rates of living beings in the history was not really due to high extinction, but due to the slowdown of the creation of a new living species. For the extinction of a living species, the living species has a very weak will of individual happiness, a very strong of group efficiency, and a strong will of group disaster. In my book, I looked at the history of single-cell bacteria, Pterosaur, and Dinosaur in some details. Despite its huge quantity, single-cell bacteria has a very weak will of group efficiency. You can see this from its body structures and its demand on the environment. It has a strong will of individual happiness. This means that it can react directly to changes in the environment. Environmental change can lead direct to its evolution. This poses a big threat to the human being if the temperature of the earth keeps rising or the human being touches unknown bacteria. Single-cell bacteria has a very weak will of group disaster. It as a whole has a very low extinction risk. Pterosaur and Dinosaur appeared in about the same time. Their evolutions in the first 20 million years are roughly same. After that, Pterosaur maintains its strong individualism. Its reproduction remained being driven by its strong will of individual efficiency. Pterosaur evolved into the big bird family. It as a whole survived the huge asteroid impact of 65 million years ago. The will of group efficiency of dinosaurs increased substantially in the last 80 million years of its existence. It became the driving force for the reproduction of dinosaurs. The consequences are the weight and the number of dinosaurs increased substantially. Its will of group disaster with the environment increased substantially. Dinosaurs disappeared during a huge asteroid impact of 65 million years ago. I hope that the human society can learn something from the fate of these three living species. With this remark, I would like to close part 9 of video series 2. Thank you for your attention.